ideas that interest us. We're going to discuss one in particular, which is the question of where are memories stored, and actually turning that question into a question and asking whether memories are stored in the brain. It's a difficult one, but a fascinating one to think about. So how would you address that so that's conceivable? Because I mentioned it to a leading researcher in the field of memory, and he told me, well, Alex, that sounds interesting, but to me it's absolutely unthinkable that memories would not be stored inside our heads.
I think this leads back to the common influence on both of us, namely the French philosopher Henri Bergson. And Bergson, in the late 19th century, in 1896, in his book Matter and Memory, argued that the brain is not a reservoir of images, it's not a filing cabinet where memories are stored. Rather, memories work through the brain. And I think you make the point that William James, the American psychologist, also thought in terms of the brain in a different way, not that it was producing thought. As T.H. Huxley said, the brain produces thought as the liver secretes bile. You know, thought's just a kind of secretion of the brain. But William James put it rather clearly, didn't he?
Yes, these are old ideas, but still totally pioneering today. James said something apparently obvious, which is that the brain has a function in thought, but then the key question is what's the nature of that function, whether it's productive or permissive. So here we have two classes, two ways of thinking about the mind and its relationship with the brain. And the orthodox way of thinking about it is, of course, the brain produces everything, perception, memory, and consciousness, and so on. But the Bergsonian or Jamesian way of thinking about it, and the way we also like to think about it, is that the brain receives and filters the mind, and in that case, memories would not need to be stored physically inside the brain. But then the question is, where are they stored? And whether that makes any sense to say, well, they're not in the brain. Where are they? In the body and the brain? Are they in the body, the brain, and the world? Or everywhere, or maybe nowhere? I would say Bergson's answer would be they are in time, not in space.
Yes. Well, I think the metaphor that I find easiest to think about this through is television. Because the idea that the brain's productive of thought and consciousness is rather like a video recorder. Everything's there inside the video recorder. It doesn't need any outside influence. It produces all those sounds and pictures from within itself, from stored memories in files on tapes or flash drives or whatever. Whereas a television depends on influences coming from outside the circuitry of the television. That's not inside the TV set. The TV set's necessary for receiving it and manifesting the pictures and the sounds, but they're coming from somewhere else. And in the case of TV, from a TV transmitter. Whereas when Bergson says they're in time, what he's saying really is that they're coming across time or through time, the memories, that they're transmitted through or across time. TV is transmitted through or across space. And this is, of course, an unfamiliar idea, but I think the TV analogy, which didn't exist, of course, in Bergson's day, or William James's, it was before radio and television became widespread, but we now have technologies that make it very clear to us that it's not all just inside. I mean, a mobile telephone, for example, wouldn't make sense if it was all just inside the mobile phone. All you do is hear recordings of yourself. The whole point of it is that it's receiving transmissions from outside itself, electromagnetic waves, and transforming them and transforming what you say into it into electromagnetic waves that go elsewhere. So I think that most of our modern technologies, like radios, telephones, and television, and the internet, insofar as a lot of it comes through satellites and so on, are actually coming from somewhere else. And so I think that's the shift in thinking that Bergson was pointing towards.
Yeah, and it's interesting you point to technological metaphors, because there's a dominant one, but there are many ways to think about this problem, also considering the hologram, which is a tricky one. And when it comes to, so we could ask, from the orthodox point of view, well, haven't we already shown, haven't neuroscientists already shown that memories are stored in the brain? But as you and I and many other people may know, this quest has been going on for more than a century. It is as old as these ideas we're talking about, the quest for the engram, right? It's like the physical location of memories. And there are many types of memories, and one could explain their differences, but the basic idea is, well, there must be a register somewhere in the brain, and they've been looking for them. And I joke because they've been finding them, but never quite there. It's there, but then it seems that this information is not there when you go back the next day. It may have moved somewhere else in the brain. So that slowly leads into a dynamical view, a resonant view of what may be going on in the brain, because again, we're not saying that the brain plays no role. Of course it plays a huge role, but maybe not how we are primed to think about it. And in a way this has to do a lot with your own views about resonant patterns and morphic resonance, which we can discuss now or a bit later if you wish. But I want to center the discussion around, well, haven't we found already memories in the brain? Well, the answer is always yes, but, or yes and no. It's funny, interesting.